Hi, my name is Bob and I love my two-car garage. Today I'm going to show you how to use the table saw. Now, I really do recommend that before you get started that you read the directions that came with your saw. Some people don't like to do that, and I understand why. Sometimes they do say strange things like don't stand on the saw and things like that. But for the most part, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to do a lot better if you start off by reading the directions. Alright, let's get into it. Now, there are basically three different types of table saws. One of them is a portable model here, or the desktop model, which is lightweight. And if you only have room for this, this will work for a lot of things. You're going to have a hard time cutting a sheet of plywood with this, but it does work for small projects. This one right here is the stationary model, and the one I prefer. It's nice and heavy duty. And you do have to pretty much set it up in your garage and leave it there. I have mine on wheels, so if I need to, I can roll it out of the way, but I hardly ever do. There's one that's in between called the contractor saw. Contractor saw is quite a bit less expensive, and it is a nice saw. It has the same, usually has the same kind of stuff inside, just the outside frame's a little more lightweight. And again, it does cost less. The more powerful saw you can get, the better. This one's 3 horse and it's 220 volts, so I had to wire my garage special for this. But if you can get a big one, get it. They also have a saw now called a saw stop, which is pretty cool. If you touch the blade, then the saw will stop. So it's virtually impossible for you to cut yourself. Again, if you can afford it, that's the way to go. I would get one if I was buying everything over again, but I have been doing this for over 30 years and I still have all my fingers. So, that's a good sign. Alright, so here we go with the actual use of the saw. Now, first of all, you should know the parts of the saw. Of course, there's the table, there's the blade. There's a throat plate right there that keeps things from falling down inside. Rip fence right here, which slide back and forth. This is what I use pretty much 90% of the time. There's also a cutoff guide, and the cutoff guide is used for cross-cutting. However, there are better ways to cross-cut narrow pieces of material. So, and we'll talk about that in another video, but if you need to cross-cut on the table saw, this is what you do it with. Again, most of the time, you're going to be ripping, so you're going to use the rip fence. Now, there's a couple of adjustments, really just 2 adjustments that need to be made on the table saw, and that's the height and the angle. Most of the time, the angle is going to be 90 degrees. And so here's my angle adjustment right here. I turn this wheel, which in this particular saw is pretty squeaky. So I guess it needs to be oiled up. But now it's 90 degrees. Not a bad idea to check that with a tri-square. And then the height of your saw is adjusted with this little wheel right here. So I can move this up and down, like that. And I should set it so it's just like a 1/4 of an inch above the blade. The lower that you can set it, the better. I mean, it shouldn't be so low where it doesn't cut all the way through, but the less blade exposed, the better. As far as safety goes, if I can use the guard, I do use the guard. And I was taught that way, and so I do use it. I don't take guards off any of my hand tools, my skill saws, anything like that. I know there's a lot of people that do, but I don't. I leave them on. I think they are effective. Sometimes you have to move them out of the way or remove them completely in order to do the operation that you need to do, but most of the time I leave it on. One of the most important safety features is the splitter. And the splitter is a piece of metal that lines up with the blade. Also has some kickback fingers on there to keep it from the wood from kicking directly back. But the splitter will move up and down. I believe in it, and this is why. Most of the time, when accidents happen on the table saw, it's because of a kickback. Now, if it just kicks back at you and hits you, it just hurts. I did have a person cry once in my adult woodworking class because it kicked back at them, but she was fine. But the more dangerous part is that when it kicks down back, sometimes if I'm moving in like this and there's no splitter there, the wood will climb over the top of the saw like this. Of course, that's in slow motion. And as it does, sometimes my hand will go with it and move right across the top of the saw. So you really have to respect this saw. It is powerful. Use as many of the safety features as you can. Alright, here we go. We're just about ready to do some cutting here. I think a good way to learn how to use any tool is to have a project. Have something that you really want to work on. Then you're motivated. So right now I just need a shelf. I need a basic shelf for something outside. So got my blade height set, check the angle on my blade, and now I need to adjust the width on my rip fence. I need it to be 11 3/4. So I've got a gauge here with a mark on it. I'm going to set it at 11 3/4. However, I never completely trust my gauge, so I'm going to check it. And it's a little bit heavy, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. And that's about right. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to start at the saw. I'm going to start to push it in just a little bit. Put a little notch in it. Take it out and check it. Make sure it's perfect. And then slide it on through. It's a good idea to have a table on the other side of your saw. And that way if it won't fall. Because when it starts to fall, you're going to be tempted to reach over there and kind of pick it up. Reaching over the blade is a bad idea. You always want to keep your hands on this side of the blade. So here we go. I think we're just about right. We're going to make a cut. Perfect. Before you do any reaching, always make sure the blade comes to a complete stop. Now, this is a pretty wide piece of wood, so I did not use a push stick. But if I'm doing something narrow, and in this case, I really can't have the guard completely in place either, so common width is 1.5 inches. I'm going to set that at 1.5 inches. I'm going to pick up my push stick, homemade, but very effective. I never want my fingers to get close to that blade. Okay, I'm going to show you how to crosscut on the table saw. Now, I don't think that it's the best way to cut narrow pieces of material. There are better options. A small cut-off saw, a chop saw, really works better. But they do make this cutoff guide for the table saw, so you can do it. Now, you can also make your cutoff guide a little bit longer, which in some cases makes it easier to use and maybe safer. And so if you take a piece of wood, screw it to the cutoff guide, give it a little more surface area. It's also going to help push that piece of wood away that's going to fall off when you're done. I'm going to go ahead and measure this piece of wood here to about 32 inches. Make sure that the rip fence is completely out of the way. When you do your cross cutting, you don't want this rip fence to be in here like this. You don't want the wood to be touching the cutoff guide and the rip fence at the same time. If you do, it's going to kick back. So make sure that you have that rip fence completely out of the way. I think I'm ready to go. Made my mark. I want to check also, before I actually make the cut, to make sure that my blade is perfectly lined up with my cutoff guide, and it is. It's in good shape, and I'm using a tri-square to do that with. You can also use just the lines, the machine lines that are on the saw itself, because those lines should be perfectly parallel to the blade. Alright, here we go. Cutting off on the table saw. Always make sure that that blade comes to a complete stop. Well, those are the two basic operations that you're going to do on the table saw. There's a lot of other cool things you can do. You can shape with it. You can put grooves in your wood called dados and rabbets. You can do dovetails with it. There's a lot of cool things you can do with the table saw. This is the basic tool for any woodworker. Alright, well that was fun. Now I'm going to leave you with this one final thought from Bob's Two-Car Garage. If you're going to get fat on barbecue potato chips.